Contemporary mythology number 2. Reality is spherical. However, we experience reality through a paradigm or a system. A system breaks the infinite sphere down into distinctions that we can grasp in language, that we can relate to as concepts. The key thing to understand is that a sphere is an infinite number of lines in symmetry and in balance, whereas the paradigms of culture, the paradigms of language, the paradigms of color, for example, we have a color for red, we have a color for blue, but there are literally infinite gradations between red and blue, just as there are infinite gradations between blue and green and yellow. We break the circle, the infinite, down into modules using a division structure. If we use the 7 rainbow color structures, we break the circle down into 7. We've broken this circle down into 6. Now, whenever you break a sphere down into a number, you have an element of waste. You have an element that is a remainder. This part of the circle doesn't fit into this construct to represent the circle. It is a remainder. When we lack imagination, when we lack distinction, we have a great deal of energy in the multidimensional universe of reality, multiverse of reality, that does not fit. It doesn't fit into language. It doesn't fit into what we're aware of. It does not fit. Now, this bit of reality that doesn't fit, for example, Rupert Sheldrake is doing the research on the parts of reality that do not fit neatly into the scientific method, beginning with the speed of light, which has been measured speeding up, slowing down, and speeding up again. This doesn't fit within the paradigm that the speed of light is a constant, which is the basis for a great deal of scientific story. It doesn't fit. Now, the purpose of all of the niggling parts of reality that don't fit into the paradigm is not to throw out the system. There's nothing wrong with this 6-sided shape. And it's much better than cutting a circle in half. If all you have is a paradigm that says this is good, this is bad, and that's all you've got, about half of reality is going to end up being good, and half of it is reality, and the part that's good is going to collapse, because in a dualistic paradigm where to have white and be conscious of it, you need to have a distinction called black, the one collapses without the other. So as soon as you decide that sweet is good and sour is bad, well, then you have to look at the complication that there's an infinite continuum between sweet and sour. In other words, that any point on that continuum is sweeter than another point on that continuum, which is more sour. So wherever you are on the continuum, it's always held in place by the fact that there's something further this way on the continuum and there's something further this way on the continuum. So you cannot really have one thing that is absolutely sweet. That's a concept. So there's nothing wrong with a 6-sided shape. There's nothing wrong with a 12-sided shape. There's nothing wrong with a 360-sided shape. But whenever you break a circle down into distinctions, you will have waste. You will have a remainder. And that remainder will not fit into the shape of the paradigm. It will not stick. It will be outside the paradigm. And as such, it will appear to threaten the paradigm. And what it's really saying is that the circle is bigger than the shape that we've drawn to represent it, which is true. Now, the value of the shape is that we can comprehend it. We cannot comprehend an infinite circle. It's just too big. We've broken down in computers 256 million different colors, but we cannot grasp that in our brain. It's too complicated. So we need the models of reality to be simple so that our limited processing power can comprehend them. However, any model of reality, by definition, is going to have some segment of energy and data occur outside of the model. This is going to cause a crisis because we build reality in response to our models, not in response to reality, to our models of reality. When we create a capitalistic paradigm or a socialist democracy or a paradigm of mathematics, there's stuff that doesn't fit into that paradigm. And the paradigm, any good paradigm, will always lead you to its edge. And so, as we look at contemporary mythology, what this drawing can show us is that we never perceive reality directly. We receive the bits of reality we are capable of perceiving through the lens of the system we are using to perceive, which is never sophisticated enough to represent reality. And so the clues that were at the edge of our system is anomalous data. The clues that we need to look elsewhere, we need to expand the system, is the anomalous data that's happening at the edge of the system. Now, this is also the terrain where science and system design intersect with dogma, because those of us who have a traumatic history as a culture and as individuals are always terrified of the unknown. The unknown is what's outside the model and the system. Now, one of the ways you can discern how much trauma is in the space is by how much fear of the unknown. When you expect to be loved, when you expect serendipity, when you expect grace and joy, the unknown is a marvelous doorway into something bigger, into something transcendent. It is beautiful, it is exquisite. When you expect to be betrayed, when you experience trauma, the unknown is more terrifying than extreme cruelty within the system. Now, this brings up a tension where the individuals who have experience that takes them outside of the system are, to the extent that they are true to themselves, going to communicate that experience. And it's going to threaten the system, just normal. At which point there is a choice to be made. And the choice is whether to champion the individuals who have experience outside of the system, number one, or whether to throw them under the bus, so to speak, to protect the system. There's all kinds of situations like this, where the law, where the education priority, where standard parenting protocol, where tax policy dictates this thing. And this thing is supposedly, theoretically, good for people. But in millions and millions of instances, it is not good for the particular people involved. Take drug law in the United States, where the DEA has lumped non-addictive, low harm psychedelics that have a tradition of shamanic use for tens of thousands of years in with synthetic, highly addictive, highly toxic drugs with no distinction. Just call them drugs. And then, in a little bit of a play on words, created a war on people and then called it a war on drugs. See, drugs don't walk around injecting themselves. If you're combating harmful behavior and enlightening behavior, both which happens in this, because there's not enough distinction. You see, this is an area where if, rather than just saying all drugs are bad, and so don't take any, you actually need distinctions. You need to know these are drugs that are addictive, these are drugs that are not addictive. These are drugs that are plant-based, these are drugs that are synthetic. These are drugs that, when you overdose, they're highly toxic to the body. These are drugs you can stuff your face with them and they don't hurt the body at all. These are drugs that have a tradition of shamanic use, and these are drugs that have no such tradition. And this is a healthy way of inducing psychedelic experiences for healing, growth, and transformation, and this is an unhealthy way of ruining the economy and hurting people's lives. And this is a safe setting in which to use drugs, and this is an unsafe setting. So if you break it down into all the distinctions, you start to get intelligence. You start to get things like, rather than saying that salt is good or salt is bad, you say, well, if you throw salt in someone's face as they're driving on the highway, not so good. If you have a little teaspoon of salt in a bread baking recipe, it's good. If you don't have any salt, you die. If you have too much, you're hypertension. Now you start to have distinctions that are intelligent enough to create good results with. And really what we do with our models is we try and create good results. What we try and do with a model of reality, which is not reality, is by following the model, we try and create good results. That's the whole point of a model. And it's just important to know that the model is never complete. In set theory, which is a mathematical theory, they have a principle which is that reality, well, the principle is, first of all, you have a set, and it's never the set that you're looking at is never the full reality, number one. Number two, you can't fully understand the set until you're outside of it. In other words, you can't understand this six-sided shape unless you're outside of it and looking at it with perspective, comparing it to 12-sided shapes, to the circle, etc. Now you have the perspective to understand it. You don't have that within it when you're in a small bit. When you are this little bit, and all this is very vast. It's too big to fully understand, but when you step back and it shrinks in size, when we reduce it from all the 5 sensory inputs of this model of reality to just a line, that's a point where we can grasp it in the abstract. So what we want to do in an intelligent reference to reality is we want to create the most sophisticated models we can comprehend. Now, the nice thing with computers is we can go a little bit further than we can typically comprehend with our own brain. I mean, we can't comprehend 256 million colors. We can all do 7. Some of us can do 50 colors, but a computer can process 256 million colors. And that's just the beginning. You can go up to millions. But we can only grasp a small thing. So we need to reduce reality to paradigms that overall provide guidance and help us work with reality, while welcoming the anomalous data not as a threat, but as evidence, as a reminder that this paradigm is just a model, and that models are not people. People are more complex than models. Reality is more complex than model. And this is why it's very valuable to develop the wisdom to understand and protect a model, meaning with no model you have just complete anarchy. You wake up and you have no framework for, should I get in bed, out of bed, work, kill someone, not kill someone, drink poison, because it's all kind of relative. You say, well, if I die, then maybe there's another reality on the other side. And there probably is. And so let's just, drink. There's anarchy. And so when you have systems such as, let's all spend a noticeable chunk of our time building something in the material world to make it better, and this is called a house, and a house has to have a roof, and we don't just leave off the southern wall in a hailstorm just because, you stick to certain systems, but then always to dance at the edge of those systems, knowing that those edges are your friends. That if you follow the anomalous data up to the edge of your system, it will take you outside your system. And suddenly your simple paradigm that, all Muslims are heretics or all Christians are infidels or whatever the system is, starts to break down in the most beautiful way with data that says, no, all Muslims are not this because I'm with a Muslim that's like this. And all Christians are not this. And all women are not this because I'm with a woman who's like this. And all capitalists are not this. And they're not this either. Oh, we're at the edge of complexity. We're at the point where the system begins to dissolve. So the system has its role to help us to become intimate and learn about reality. And right up at that point where we really understand the system, and we're vulnerable to becoming dogmatic, all men are, all women are, to then, you're not, and you're not, and you're not, and this isn't, and this isn't, and this isn't. It's still a generally good working model, but it is not reality. And I don't want to confuse the two, or I risk becoming a violent extremist, a dogmatist, who will defend an imperfect system out of their fear of the unknown.